Good evening, short story writers, and here's another short story idea from Life in Coronavirus Times. Live in the time of cholera, so it should be Life in the Time of Coronavirus. Okay, so yes, when this all began, I didn't know there was going to be a second lockdown. I kind of assumed there would, but I knew that the first one in England was going to take quite a while, and I predicted that a fair few things would happen, and they have been the subject so far of the short story ideas prompts so far, and there are one or two more. Some of them are very dramatic, like last night's was murder, and some of them are less so. So we'll go with a less so one tonight, shall we? There was all the hoarding that went on, but I also thought that if it were deemed wise to stay at home as much as possible, most sensible people would think, well, okay, let's do that. This is ignoring whether or not the conspiracy theorists are correct, and it's all to do with 5G masts and goodness knows what else. I mean, there are short story prompts to be written there, particularly if you're into science fiction or action or thrillers. You could take the conspiracy theories and run with them, make them even more diabolical. However, I thought that one of the things that people might start doing would be to practice frugality or minimalism, and see a transformation in their lives. Some people would have to, because in certain economies they would lose their source of income for one reason or another. They could have been self-employed and not met government guidelines to receive help and support. It could be that they quit their job immediately before the furlough schemes around the world, which is government support and subsidy again, kicked in. For whatever reason, they may find themselves having to practice frugality in order to stay in their homes with a roof over their head. And that in itself would be the initiating problem that they need to cut back. So they start to make a list of things in their life which they could possibly do without and eventually have to live without. So obviously, if this were literary fiction, then it would be fairly easy to do. And I don't know whether it's available on Netflix or where, but there's a film with Tom Hanks called Larry Crown, where this pretty much happens. He's made redundant, and he has, and his wife, I think she kicks him out, if I remember rightly, and so he has to start cutting back, and he re-educates himself, and so it's a very positive movie. Julia Roberts is in it as well, if I remember correctly. Yes. Okay, so that would be literary fiction. Just explore the human side of having to deal with this, and you need to show him or her or it. Why would it be it? Well, if it's science fiction, it could be a robot having to practice frugality, or an artificial intelligence. And a similar sort of situation, so moving on to the science fiction, fantasy and horror aspect, would be there's all the talk about going and colonizing Mars. So there's going to have to be a certain amount of frugality practice there, and there will be a similar sort of situation. There will be times when it will not be possible to go out of the base. And in fact, I envisage the base is going to have to be underground because, science fiction people, there is no magnetic field on Mars. The planet doesn't have a magnetic field, and therefore our magnetic field protects us from solar radiation. That's why we have the aurora borealis and aurora australis. I'm not sure. I think it's australis, because the magnetic field makes the solar wind enter the atmosphere at those points. So there's going to be times of spectacular sunspot activity, perhaps, where people cannot go out and they're going to be subject to a lockdown of their own. And then the action stroke thriller part would be Frugality. Oh, okay, yeah. The MacGyver situation. Somebody has to get out of a particular situation or arrive at a certain conclusion using only what they've got, and it's I don't know, something you might find in a kitchen, something you might find in a bathroom, something you might find in the average tool shed, in a gardener's shed. Ooh, I shouldn't say that really, because fertilizer. Whatever. There are other things in garden sheds, such as wire and secateurs and very sharp implements that the action hero could press into service. So, that is the fiction writing prompt for tonight. Frugality. And the point is that these ideas act as springboards for other ideas. You don't have to set your story in the time of coronavirus. It's just that these are the things that will probably happen as a result of lockdown, and you can take that and use that as a principle in another aspect of your story, like with the Martian setting. It does not have to be set on Earth even, and you could write a literary fiction story set on Mars, because human beings are human beings, and that's what it's about. Okay, 7:32, been blathering on enough. As usual, if you like the idea, give it a thumbs up. If it's terrible, give it a thumbs down, and happy writing.